The silence in the recording studio wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that comes from people holding their breath, waiting to see if something beautiful will survive or shatter completely. Sammy Davis Jr. stood in front of the microphone, both hands gripping the stand like it was the only thing keeping him upright. His face was still bandaged on the left side. The socket where his eye had been was covered with white gauze and surgical tape. It had been 11 weeks since the accident. 11 weeks since his Cadillac had hit that drainage culvert on Route 66 outside San Bernardino at 70 miles an hour. 11 weeks since the steering column had punched through the windshield and destroyed his left eye. 11 weeks since the doctors told him he'd never perform again. But here he was, in Capitol Records Studio B, November 1954, trying to prove everyone wrong. His band was set up behind the glass. The same guys who'd played with him for years. Morty Stevens on piano, his conductor, his arranger, his friend. The horn section, the rhythm section. 12 men who'd seen Sammy at his best, and were now about to see him at his most vulnerable. Morty spoke through the intercom, his voice gentle. "You ready, Sam?" Sammy didn't answer right away. He was staring at the microphone like it was a stranger. His right hand, his only good hand now since his left was still weak from the nerve damage, trembled slightly as he adjusted the mic stand. "Sam?" Morty said again. "Yeah," Sammy said quietly. "Yeah, I'm ready." But he wasn't moving. He was frozen there, one eye closed, one eye gone, his body still healing from injuries that should have killed him. Morty looked at the band. They looked back. Nobody knew what to do. This was supposed to be a test session. Just Sammy and the band. No audience, no pressure. Just a chance to see if his voice was still there, if the accident had taken that too. Because everyone had heard the rumors, that the impact had damaged his throat, that the trauma had broken something in his vocal cords, that even if he could physically sing, the fear would strangle whatever sound tried to come out. Sammy had heard the rumors too. And for 11 weeks he'd been too afraid to find out if they were true. He'd spent those weeks in the hospital, then, at home, staring at himself in the mirror, at the stranger with one eye, at the face that would never look the same, at the man who'd lost the thing he'd built his entire identity around, his looks, his youth, his perfect smile. Gone. And maybe, he feared, his voice had gone with it. But 2 nights ago, Frank Sinatra had called. "Smokey," Frank had said. "You sitting around feeling sorry for yourself?" "I'm recovering, Frank." "Bullshit. You're hiding. I know hiding when I hear it." Sammy hadn't responded. "Listen to me," Frank had continued. "You're Sammy Davis Jr. You've been performing since you were 3 years old. You think one eye is going to stop you? You think a car accident is going to take away what God gave you? Frank, get your ass to the studio. Morty's waiting. Sing one song. Just one. If it's not there, we'll figure something else out. But you owe it to yourself to find out." And now here he was, standing in front of the microphone. Paralyzed, Morty spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper through the intercom. "Sam, we don't have to do this today. We can wait, another week, another month, however long you need." Sammy shook his head. "No more waiting." His voice was rough, unused, like an instrument that had been put away too long. "What do you want to sing?" Morty asked. Sammy thought for a moment. Then he said, "Birth of the Blues." The band exchanged glances. It was one of Sammy's signature songs. Big, brassy, powerful. The kind of song that required everything. Breath control, range, emotion, timing. It was also the last song Sammy had sung before the accident. "You sure?" Morty asked. "Yeah. If I'm gonna do this, I'm going to do it right." Morty nodded. He turned to the band. "You heard him. Birth of the Blues. Let's give him a soft intro, let him find his way in." The musicians picked up their instruments. The piano player flexed his fingers. The horn section brought their instruments to their lips. Everyone was ready. Except Sammy. He stood there, his one good eye closed now, his head bowed. His lips were moving, but no sound was coming out. He was praying. or talking to himself, or trying to remember who he used to be. Morty counted them in. 1, 2, 3. The piano began, soft, gentle. The opening chords of Birth of the Blues. The horns came in, muted and careful, like they were afraid to wake someone sleeping. The intro played. 4 bars, 8 bars, 12 bars. Sammy missed his cue. He just stood there, eyes closed, gripping the microphone stand. The band kept playing. They looped back to the top, gave him another chance. Still nothing. Morty was about to stop them when Sammy finally opened his eye. And he sang. But the sound that came out wasn't what anyone expected. It was broken, cracked, barely recognizable. Oh, they say, some people. His voice shook on every word. The notes were there, technically, but they had no power, no life. It was like listening to someone trying to sing underwater. The band kept playing, but their faces betrayed them. This was bad. This was worse than they'd feared. Sammy heard it too. He heard how weak he sounded, how small, how destroyed. He stopped singing mid-phrase. His hand dropped from the microphone. His head bowed again. The band stopped playing. In the control room, Morty closed his eyes. This was the thing he'd been dreading, the moment they'd all been trying to avoid. Sammy Davis Jr., the greatest entertainer alive, couldn't sing anymore. The silence that followed was devastating. Sammy stood there, not moving. His shoulders were shaking. He was crying. Silent, wrenching sobs that made his whole body convulse. Morty got up from the console. He was about to go into the studio, to tell Sammy it was okay, that they'd find another way, when something happened. Sammy straightened up. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. He took a deep breath, and he spoke into the microphone. "Again." Morty stopped. "Sam." "Again," Sammy repeated. His voice was steady now. Hard. "From the top." "Sam, maybe we should." "Morty," I said again. There was something in his voice that stopped every objection. Something fierce. Something that wouldn't take no for an answer. Morty looked at the band. They looked back at him, uncertain. "All right," Morty said. From the top, the piano started again. The horns came back in. The rhythm section found the groove. And this time, when Sammy opened his mouth, something different came out. It wasn't the polished, perfect Sammy Davis Jr. that audiences knew. It wasn't the smooth crooner or the powerful belter. It was something raw. Sammy sang the opening line again, and this time, there was pain in it. Real pain. The kind you can't fake. The kind that comes from being broken and trying to put yourself back together while everyone watches. Oh, they say some people long ago. His voice cracked on long ago, but he pushed through it. We're searching for a different tune. He was off-key on different, but he didn't stop. One that they could croon. And then something happened. On the word croon, his voice caught. Not in a bad way, in a way that made you feel something, made you lean in, made you listen. The band felt it too. The piano player sat up straighter. The horn section leaned into their instruments. Sammy kept singing. As only they can. His voice was getting stronger now, finding its footing, like a man learning to walk again after being bedridden. They only had the rhythm section locked in tighter. So they started swaying to and fro, and then it happened. On the word fro, Sammy hit a note that stopped time. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. But it was real. It was honest. It was a man pouring everything he had, all his pain, all his fear, all his hope, into a single sound. And it was beautiful. The band felt it. Every musician in that room felt their skin prickle, felt something shift in the air. Morty stood up in the control room, his hand over his mouth. Sammy kept singing, and with each line his voice grew stronger. Not smoother, not prettier, but more powerful. Because this wasn't the voice of a man trying to be perfect. This was the voice of a man who'd stared death in the face and decided to sing anyway. They didn't know just what to use. The horn swelled behind him. That is how the blues, his voice climbed, reaching for something just out of reach, really began. And on that last word, Sammy let go. He stopped trying to sound like the old Sammy. He stopped trying to be perfect. He just sang. And what came out was transcendent. The note he hit on wasn't technically perfect. It wavered, it broke in places. But it had so much emotion, so much soul, that it didn't matter. The band played the final flourish. Sammy held the last note as long as his damaged lungs would allow. And when it finally ended, when the last sound faded into silence, nobody moved. Sammy stood at the microphone, breathing hard, his one eye closed, tears streaming down his face. In the control room, Morty was crying too. So was the piano player, and the trumpet player, and the drummer. 12 hardened musicians, men who'd played with everyone from Sinatra to Ella Fitzgerald, were openly weeping. Because they hadn't just heard a man sing a song. They'd heard a man prove that art is stronger than tragedy, that the human spirit can survive anything, that sometimes the most beautiful sounds come from broken instruments. Finally, Morty pressed the intercom button. "Sam!" Sammy opened his eye and looked at the glass. "That was..." Morty's voice broke. He had to start again. "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." Sammy didn't say anything. He just nodded. One of the horn players, a guy named Pete who'd been playing jazz for 30 years, spoke up. "Sammy, I've been doing this a long time. I've played with everyone. And I'm telling you right now, what you just did, that's the best vocal performance I've ever witnessed. Ever." The rest of the band murmured their agreement. Sammy's legs gave out. He sat down on the floor of the studio, his back against the wall, and put his face in his hands. Morty came into the studio. He sat down next to Sammy. Didn't say anything. Just sat there. After a long time, Sammy spoke. "It's different now." "Yeah," Morty said. "It is. I don't sound like me anymore." "No," Morty agreed. "You sound better." Sammy looked at him. "How can you say that? I can barely control my voice. I'm all over the place." Morty smiled. "Exactly. Before the accident, you were perfect. Technically flawless. You hit every note, every time. But you know what? Perfect is boring. What you just did, that wasn't perfect. That was real. And real is better than perfect any day of the week." Sammy wiped his eyes. "I'm scared, Morty. I know. What if I can't do this? What if I can't perform? What if people see me like this and they'll love you?" Morty interrupted. "Even more than before. Because now they'll see that you're human. That you can be hurt. And that you can survive. That's what people need to see, Sam. They need to know that when life knocks you down, you can get back up." Sammy was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I want to record it." "Record what?" "That song. I want to record it, exactly like we just did it. Imperfect, broken, real." Morty smiled. "Then let's do it." 3 weeks later, Sammy Davis Jr. returned to the stage at Ciro's nightclub in Los Angeles. He wore a patch over his left eye. His face was still healing. He walked out to the microphone with visible hesitation. The audience didn't know what to expect. And then he sang. Not with the polished perfection they remembered, but with something deeper. Something that made them feel instead of just hear. When he finished his first song, there was a moment of silence. Then the entire club erupted. People weren't just applauding, they were crying, cheering, standing, because they'd just witnessed something rare. They'd witnessed a man transformed by tragedy into something greater than he'd been before. Sammy Davis Jr. performed for another 36 years. He became an even bigger star after the accident than he'd been before it. And every time he sang, people heard it, that rawness, that truth, that reminder that beauty doesn't come from perfection, it comes from surviving.